There comes a time in every GM's life where they feel like their villains are getting boring. One Piece has been running for 1,000+ episodes, and its villains just keep getting better. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. How an anime can run for so long, but the villains still get better every time. The first thing that I picked up on was the villain design. Powers tend to feel like a shopping list. You flip through the book, you go, oh, fire damage is good. And this one gets a legendary action. It lets you give him a fear aura, because fear auras are fun. And you put all that together and it does work, but it's also completely interchangeable. You can swap the flavor text and it's a different monster with the identical soul, which is to say no soul at all. Eiichiro Oda, the author of One Piece, never does this. In One Piece, a villain's powers are more like the character's philosophy made physical, and you could figure out who they are just from watching them fight. Let's take Crocodile, suave, cynical, absolutely convinced that trust is a con, and that whoever controls the resources controls everything. And what's his power? He's made of sand, and he can drain the moisture out of anything he touches. He creates a drought, he starves a nation and turns his people against each other while positioning himself as the hero. So if we summed up what his power is into a sentence, it would be, I will dry you out. I will make the world as barren as I am. Doflamingo, a man who genuinely believes the strong has an absolute right to do whatever they like to the weak. So he uses invisible strings to turn people into puppets, and not just to fight him, he makes good people commit atrocities against their own families while fully conscious inside their own bodies. Which is giving me flashbacks to Obsession, which I watched over the weekend. That film is just ugh. Then there's Gecko Moria, who I think is the most underrated villain in the series. Mostly because his powers are so sad. When you understand them, Moria used to have a crew in the New World. That crew got slaughtered, and it broke something in him permanently. What he learned from that grief was caring about living people is a design flaw, so now he steals shadows and stuffs them into zombie corpses. He fights by proxy and delegates his entire ambition into disposable thralls, because in his broken mind, zombies can't feel pain and they can't break your heart by dying on you again. His whole combat style is a man building a crew that cannot hurt him. And let's not forget Enel, who's the purest version of this in the whole series. He thinks he's a literal god, omniscient, untouchable, entitled to judgment, so his power is lightning. He travels instantly. He can hear every word whispered across an entire sky island. He kills a man from miles away just for complaining. The way that he's designed and fights and thinks makes you feel like you're fighting a whole religion that can kill you. So what I took from this was that we should stop picking abilities because they fit a CR budget or because of a damage type that feels appropriate. Instead, ask one question: could my players work out this villain's personality just from how they fight and how they've arranged the room? Let's make that concrete. Say you've got a corrupt archmage, paranoid, hordes of wealth, doesn't trust a soul. The lazy version is to say they stand in the tower casting a fireball. Oda's version would be their defensive runes that absorb the party's spell slots to power their shield. They literally sustain themselves on other people's resources because that's what they've always done. Their throne room has pressure plates that only stay safe if someone stands on one and takes the hit, because the archmage believes deep in their bones that people will always sacrifice each other when it's convenient, and they've built a room to prove it. The fight becomes more of a debate where the villain is trying to win a point about human nature and the party gets to prove them wrong. We're expressing the soul through the stat block, and Oda almost never writes a villain who's just an evil guy. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that doesn't work, because it does. Some of the best villains are just evil. But in this case, his best antagonists are distorted reflections of the heroes. The same starting material but different choices. They exist to show you what the hero could have been. Blackbeard is the masterclass here, and the scene everyone points to is such a small, weird, brilliant piece of writing. Luffy and Blackbeard meet on Jaya, and they eat cherry pies. Luffy hates the pie, but loves the drink, and Blackbeard loves the pie and hates the drink. And as stupid as that sounds, that whole scene tells you everything about these two characters. They're the opposites, but they start from the same place, you know? They both have dreams they believe in, they both believe in fate, and they are both chasing absolute freedom on the open can see, and when they talk about it, they're using almost the same words. A man's dream will never die. Blackbeard says that, and he means it, but the definitions of freedom are opposed in a way that I think is one of the sharpest bits of characterization in modern fiction. For Luffy, freedom is communal. It's loyalty, gratitude, the right of everyone at his table to live how they want, which means his freedom is bound up in protecting other people's dignity. But for Blackbeard, freedom means nothing above him and no obligations below. He can betray whoever he wants, plunder whatever he feels like, or kill whoever bothers him, because if you're strong enough to do it, no one can say you can't. He's basically Luffy with empathy surgically removed. And you get this as a smaller scale all over the series. My favourite little version is Captain Kuro back in Syrup Village, which, remember, is Usopp's introduction arc. And that's not a coincidence. Usopp and Kuro are both liars. Usopp tells enormous, ridiculous, obviously untrue stories, and he tells them to a sick girl in an empty big house because they make her laugh. He lies to give people something. Kuro spent 3 years pretending to be a humble, devoted butler, purely so he could murder that same girl, inherit her money, and retire somewhere quiet. He lies to take. They're both deceivers. One lies to protect life, one lies to consume it. Oda puts them in the same arc so the comparison does the work without anyone having to say it out loud. And the way that I use this at my tables is that I don't design villains on their own. I design them around my player characters. Look at the backstories your players handed you, and look at their ideals they wrote on the sheet. Then build your villain around that material. If you've got a paladin whose entire identity is their found family or fellow orphans, a generic necromancer is just gonna suck. Give them a big mom. Give them a charismatic patriarch who also talks constantly about family, who has built an enormous devoted household and treats every single member of it as property to be traded, punished, or thrown away. You're reflecting your player characters in a really rotten way. In the back of their minds, you want them thinking, this could be me if things go slightly wrong. And one form of modern storytelling that drives me up the wall is the sad backstory redemption. The villain does something horrific like burns a city or enslaves a country, then we get the flashback, the tearful confrontation, and the hero forgives them, and the story goes out of its way to make us feel that everything's basically fine now, and the mass grave is sort of quietly not mentioned again. Oda flatly refuses to do this, and I do feel this is one of the reasons his world feels heavy in a good way. His approach, and it's one worth remembering, is that a backstory explains a villain's decision making, it does not excuse their monstrosity. Doflamingo's childhood was genuinely hell. His family gave up their status, and the people they moved in among hunted them like animals, burned them out, shot at them, put them through things that a child should never survive. And it absolutely explains why he grew up obsessed with status and domination and humiliating people. And to make sure nobody misses the point, Oda gives him a brother. Corazon went through the exact same childhood with all the same terrors and hunger and loss. And Corazon's response to all that pain was to throw himself in front of a dying child and burn his life down to save him. And then there's Senor Pink, who I bring up because his backstory has emotionally destroyed more grown adults than any other 5-minute flashback in anime. If you don't know him, this is the man dressed up like a baby. He lost his infant son to a fever. His wife, after learning he'd lied to her about being a pirate, got caught in a landslide and was barely able to respond. And he discovered that the one single thing that made her flicker and got like a twitch of a smile was seeing him in their dead son's baby clothes. So he put them on, and then he never took them off. He walked out into the world dressed like that for years and took every ounce of mockery because it was the only thing that reached her. And Senor Pink is still a senior executive in a mass murdering syndicate. He's still complicit in enslaving entire country. So when you write a tragic past for your big bad, don't use it as bait for your forced redemption arc. I've seen so many campaigns where the GM has clearly decided the villain gets redeemed and the players can feel the rails under their feet, and it deflates the whole point of what you're trying to do. Use the past to make the twisted logic legible. If your warlord watches a magical plague eat their homeland, then yes, of course they're now hunting down and executing every magic user they can find. That tracks with the person that you've created. But when your players finally corner them, don't have them crumble and apologize. They own it. Let them look at your wizard in the eye and say, my country is ash and I'm doing unforgivable things so it never happens again. And I'll burn yours down too if that's what it takes. The explanation isn't an excuse. It keeps the world feeling real and the stakes sharp. And it makes the moments where somebody does genuinely change actually mean something because you haven't had to hand it out for free. All that's great, Flamey, but how does Oda escalate for 1,000 episodes without hitting a wall? Great question, viewer. He doesn't escalate upwards, he escalates sideways. He uses lateral escalation. Basically, instead of making the next villain hit for a larger number, he changes what kind of problem the villain has. Basically, the difficulty changes in quality, not quantity. Watch the progression. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Arlong is a local, physical, deeply personal problem. He's a brute who extorts a village for protection money and spent 8 years grinding one specific person down. The threat is a fist in this case, and it's aimed at someone the party loves. And then Crocodile turns the dial sideways into politics. He's not just a strong dude, he's a decorated public hero running a national conspiracy. He manufactured a drought and then steered an entire country towards civil war while everyone cheered for him. Beating him means untangling a plot and stopping a war, which is a pretty punchy side quest if you ask me. Enel goes sideways again into environment. He turns the Sky Island itself into a surveillance grid. Hearing everything, he's got a weapon that can wipe the country off the map, and they don't need to kill him to win, they just need to ring a bell, to keep a promise that's centuries old, and the fight resolves around that. Rob Lucci and Spandam. The names in this series are just insane. They split the threat clean in half. Lucci is the physical predator who pushes Luffy's body past its limit, and Spandam is the sniveling coward who'd lose a fight to a regular marine, but he holds a government pen, and with that pen he can summon a fleet to erase an island. With these two, you've got one who's a monster and then the other one who's like a state, but the state is worse. Big Mom flips that genre entirely. She's so far beyond the heroes that the objective stops being about, trying to be victorious, and it's literally just pull off the heist, get your friend, get out alive. Basically survival horror with a cake theme. And then you've got your 5 elders, the administrative horror, total political legitimacy, total control over what the world is even allowed to know, and a regeneration that ordinary damage simply does not interact with. You can't beat them by being strong. The through line is that the physical fight is almost never the only victory condition. You beat the villain by solving the specific problem they are, if that makes sense. And this can be translated for your tables by using 2 tools. The first one is pressure stacks. Every major campaign villain gets 4 layers. Body, what they personally do in a fight. Network, lieutenants, spies, hired muscles, allies who owe them. System, the laws, propaganda, the money, the institutions that protect them. And then clock. What gets measurably worse in the world if the party does nothing this week? So when your players go to attack any layer, corrupt region in the capital, your fighter can go at the body, your rogue can gut the network, bribe an officer, turn a captain, make 3 key people vanish, and your bard can wreck the system by getting the region's crimes in front of the right crowd and dismantling their legitimacy in public, Your wizard can then research something that slows the clock down and buys everyone a month. I've tried this and it works so well because it means that every single build feels load bearing and combat is one option instead of the only door that the players can go through. The second tool is to make the win condition specific, and to say it out loud actually in this case. Your players are not psychic and they will default to we fight it unless you tell them otherwise, basically. So you tell them if they're facing a self-styled god like Enel, the goal is light the beacon and signal the rebellion before the storm engine fires. If they're facing an overpowered matriarch like Big Mum, then tell them straight to their faces, this woman is wildly outside your weight class. You are here to get the diplomat and treaty and get the fuck out. And the great thing about this is it doesn't feel like you're taking away your player's agency, you're just giving them a puzzle instead of a health bar, which honestly, watching a party plan a heist is a lot more fun than watching them roll damage 40 times. Speaking of interesting antagonists to throw at your players, the 2022 Emmy Award-winning fellow YouTuber Trek has just released a bestiary for D&D 5e with 100 monsters in it. It literally has every creature type you can think of, and it covers CR from 0 to 20, and this isn't just a reskin of the things we have seen before. These are completely original monsters that all come with plot hooks to help inspire your next session's prep, with a specific focus on player experience, which I'm a firm believer in. Legendary mechanics? Forget about it. These bad boys come with multi-phase fights, magical defenses monsters that can be broken using the right damage types, and all that sweet artwork you see, made by some truly talented human artists. And Val from Corkboards and Curiosities helped make sure that the monsters were interesting from a narrative point of view, not just mechanically. And at the very least, you should check out Trek and Val because their channels are amazing. If you want to get your hands on this 74-page book, then check out the link in the description. Thank you Trek for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to it. So now that we've pulled apart what Oda is doing, before we finish, I want to strip away all the One Piece names and leave you with 6 things you can actually write down and use when you build your next villain. 1. Power reflects worldview. Moria delegates every fight to corpses because he's terrified of losing anyone living ever again. You want your stat block to reflect the person. Got a paranoid hoarder who assumes everyone's a thief? Don't just crank up the AC, give them a reaction that lets them steal something when they're targeted. A reaction, an item, or a prepared spell. Make the mechanics expose the broken bit. 2. Villains are mirrors of the party. Luffy's freedom is communal, Blackbeard's freedom is predatory. Same dream, but they're on opposite sides. Read the ideals your players actually wrote down. If your paladin swore an uncompromising oath to Order, give them an antagonist who's a paladin of Order 2, one who kept the oath so rigidly he turned a city into a beautiful administrated prison. 3. Arlong Park is not a boss arena, it's 8 years of one woman's life and an entire town's slow financial strangling, standing there in physical form. Let the party meet the harm before they meet the villain. Put refugees in the tavern, let the shopkeeper explain the tax with a completely flat voice. By the time the initiative gets rolled, they already care, and you don't have to make a speech. 4. Spandam would lose a fistfight to a filing cabinet, and he can still call down a fleet. You need to give your villains levers, legal protection that makes hitting them a crime. Control the grain, so killing them starves the city. Ownership over a bridge. Force your players to think off the grid, and let the clever solution be the real solution, you know? 5. Big Mum's crew is stuffed with children desperate to escape her, daughters loyal to their husbands instead, and allies quietly planning her funeral. You should split every hostile faction into 3 buckets. True believers, these you fight. Benefactors, these you bribe, blackmail, or outbid because they're in for the money. Trapped participants, these you rescue, and they become the best allies your party gets all campaign, because nobody knows the tyrant's weaknesses like someone who's been trapped in its house. And then 6. Defeating the villain has to change the campaign. Don't reset the world to a peaceful default. Who takes the throne? What does the neighboring kingdom do with a sudden power vacuum on its border? What happens to 400 unemployed, armed, frightened minions? Let the victory be permanent and messy. That mess becomes your next arc, and your players built it themselves, which means they're going to be 100 times more invested in trying to sort it out. So the next time you sit down and plan a chapter, just stop and think before you look at something with a bigger number or a higher challenge rating to put in front of your players. As GMs, we need to move away from the default every villain needs to be stronger than the last, and start really digging into what kind of problem haven't they faced yet. Give them a problem to solve instead. I mean, hey, it must work because Oda's been doing it for 29 years. But anyways, how do you do this in your campaigns? If you do something similar to me, leave it in the comments and share it for everyone else to read. If you're a player and you think your GM does a great job of this, let us know below so we can all share our collective knowledge. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay spicy adventurers.